chased by the deep state, fighting for independence, thinking about revolution, looking for alternative solutions. The enemies of the deep state will tell you what others even don't dare to think. Manuel Ochsenreiter and Mateusz Piskorski.
Hello to the next edition of the Quarantine podcast Mateusz Piskorski and me, Manuel Ochsenreiter, are doing. This is again a special edition since we are still in Corona quarantine and are protecting ourselves from the virus.
Yes. In the bunkers. In concrete bunkers.
Still with flickering gas lights. Don't wonder about my voice. It is just a little cold. I hope you will tolerate that. It is not the coronavirus. And Mateusz and me, we were not drinking the whole weekend.
I thought it was because of shouting the orders. The soldiers you have there in the bunker, yes?
Yes, thank you for the more noble explanation. I appreciate that. So today will be a special edition. It can be, and this is a high-risk edition we are doing, it can be either the most entertaining podcast we ever did, or it can be the most boring one. I think the extremes are open to both directions. What are you thinking?
Of course, as we are the extremists, we choose only extreme solutions.
Absolutely. So we will play today the good old game, Battleship. I think everyone knows this. Battleship is a game where everyone has 100 fields on a paper, and on these fields are the ships. We have one aircraft carrier with 5 fields. We have a battleship with 4 fields. We have a destroyer with 3 fields, and we have 2 submarines with 2 fields. The special thing is that both Germany and Poland are now on the sea with aircraft carriers, what is very, very great, right?
Well, when it comes to Poland, we only have some floating museums. So you can tell that it's a purely hypothetical scenario which we are playing now, as Poland doesn't have its marine forces.
You know, if you would be, for example, from a country like Sudan or so, I would even offer you 2 rubber boats.
Yes, but unfortunately we are on the Baltic coast, not on the Red Sea coast.
Yeah, so we have to do this. So the game is very easy. Mateusz will say a number like C3, and I will check on my field, and if it is a hit I will say hit, and if it isn't a hit I will say fail or water, and the same vice versa. Who sank all the battleships of the opponent first won the sea battle and is victorious forever, I think.
And till the next time. And anyway, if we cannot manage to sink all the ships, yes, of course, the one who sinks more ships wins.
Yes. To not to extend this podcast to 7 hours, I think that's pretty fair for the listeners.
Yeah.
By the way, just before we forget, we are still, I said it in the beginning, we are still under Corona quarantine. And did you hear we have now a celebrity among us who shares our fate, Angela Merkel, my chancellor?
Yes, she was doing a test, I have heard, yes?
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes, it's true.
Well,
and her doctor who was treating her was in contact with a positive tested corona patient. So she is now also in a 2 weeks quarantine, and I will try to invite her, of course, for our next podcast. I think it could be very interesting. I doubt that she would agree, but why not trying?
And would you like to play warships with her?
Absolutely, well? Yes. I would prefer her to you, to say the ugly truth.
Okay, I fully understand you. Let's hope we can get in touch with her next time.
Yeah. You know, there are different battleship playing characters. There are always the guys, and I hope you are not one of those who are putting all the ships in one corner. You know these people?
Let it be a secret, okay? When it comes to that.
I got you, I think. Okay. Who will start? You are the younger one. You may start.
Well, the older one should start, but anyway, okay. B4.
Water. Yes,
and it's your turn.
And very important, it's not allowed to lie. I made a photo before we started of my battlefield, so I can prove to the audience that I am at least not lying.
But I haven't seen the photo.
Yes, I will not show you before we play.
Just to make it clear that it's not a scenario we are playing here,
yes,
but it's real.
Okay.
Okay, then your turn.
G7.
Once more, G7. Yes.
Yes.
You tell. Water.
Come on. Okay. It's
okay.
Your turn.
Well, if it's my turn, then let's say C6.
Water.
Your turn.
D3.
Hit.
So now it's my turn again after a hit, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
D3 is a hit. D4.
Hit.
D5.
Hit, of course.
Oh, I think I have either now already your aircraft cruiser or or your battleship. D2.
Water.
Okay, it's your turn.
Then let's say I5.
Hit.
Perfect. Okay, then H5.
Water.
Okay. So before we continue, let's discuss at least one geopolitical topic. Yes?
Absolutely, yes.
So make a short break and
yes.
Not to be extremely boring for our listeners.
Yes. Okay.
So to make it really with let's say to start with something serious, as we have announced, we are in the bunkers. Of course, you all follow the situation when it comes to the pandemic or the epidemic, and the question we would like you to discuss, and also we would like to make you think about it. Will the world be the same after the pandemic? Of course, if we manage to cope with the pandemic itself. But anyway, what will be the role of geopolitical players like Russia, like China, and what will be the role and situation of European Union, NATO, and all Western geopolitical blocs? Let's start with Russia. Have you heard that the Russian military aircrafts are flying with some equipment and assistance to Italy?
Yes, of course, and even also the Chinese and the Cuban doctors are helping.
That's true.
What we see now is the second and the so-called third world are supporting the first world, the so-called first world.
Yes, that's true.
And it's a very interesting development, since when it was vice versa, the first world, when it started in China, was literally doing nothing to help, but criticizing, making fun, neglecting the efforts. So what we see now is also on a geopolitical level a very interesting move, which is noticed by the European population, which is not just noticed on a political level, but the ordinary people are noticing right now what's happening in the world. I think that is the important impact.
As well, and also some of the listeners know, I'm not so Eurosceptic as you are. So for me, of course, it's a big failure of European Union as a bloc. I mean, what happens now, the lack of solidarity and so on. But on the other hand, I'm really glad that we have an illustration which clearly shows to everyone, I guess, in Europe and all over the world, of two different models of reacting. First one is United States. You have probably heard and read about actually a German company, CureVac, which was trying to find out a vaccine against coronavirus, and which was almost bribed by Trump's administration, which wanted to have the patents and all the knowledge of the given German company exclusively for the United States.
They wanted more or less to purchase it, right? They were doing
not to purchase it, because as far as I know, the company, the German company, is working only thanks to its close cooperation with a state-owned Koch Institute. Yes.
Yes. Right.
So this is the first model, the model of US, let's say, trying to preserve its hegemony even in times of pandemic. Yes. Mm-hmm. And also of US hegemony based on purely liberal capitalistic, let's say, worldview. Yes. On the other hand, you have Russia. The Russian aircrafts. Some people here, I don't know if the same voices are to be heard in Germany, but some people in not only in Poland but in the United States, for instance, say that it's a new kind of hybrid war waged by Russia against the West. I mean the whole assistance given to Italy. Can you imagine? What do they claim is that Russia is organizing all this operation because after the whole pandemic, Italy will 100% veto the prolongation of sanctions against Russia in the European Union. Do you agree with me?
Yes, and what is an absolutely political, logically move after all that. There is nothing, not even anything special to be discussed about this, that Italy will do it, not because Italy is under pressure, but that is what you do after you get so much help and so much support, unexpected help and support, while those countries you expect the help and support are doing literally nothing for you. That is a logical move, and most probably it will take place, yes.
Well, the Italian population, the Italian society, the Italian nation are traditionally very, let's say, rationalist on the one hand. On the other hand, they are quite friendly towards Russia. We have heard a lot of initiatives before in the regional parliaments of different Italian regions, which were also calling the government to lift the sanctions. But on the other hand, of course, we also might expect that if the Italian government, in the future will try to block the sanctions against Russia, it will be under a huge pressure of the United States. By the way, still Italy, as we both know, is an occupied country. I don't remember how many American soldiers are there on the Italian soil. But anyway, those soldiers, this is another good example. Russians are sending soldiers which I think will not stay there. Yes. When it's already done with the pandemic, with the virus. On the other hand, you have occupying forces of US which are staying there and which are doing literally nothing to assist and help the Italian authorities in fighting the coronavirus. This is also another good example and illustration. Yes, they have the US military base in Aviano, the air base.
Yes.
The other bases, practically in politological terms, in military terms, they are logically one might say that they are occupied, half occupied country. Yes. So this is another example of, I hope, the bankruptcy of United States and its policy of controlling Europe. Yes. Let's hope for that, and let's really appreciate what is Russia doing now. And I also hope that it was a pure coincidence that the Russian aircrafts carrying the medical equipment were flying through Turkey Yes, through Turkey and Greece, as far as I remember. I have seen some maps. Because in Russia already some media claim that some countries like Ukraine, Poland, perhaps also Germany and some other Western countries have blocked its airspace, and that's why the Russian aircrafts had to choose the southern route to Italy. But hopefully, I mean, the information is not confirmed. I also like to tell it to the listeners that maybe for other practical reasons the Russian military chose that southern road. Yes, so let's hope so. Okay, so if you are ready, let's come back to our battle.
You just wanted to win some time that you get your guys away from your battleship right now, right?
Yes.
And by the way, for the children, because we don't want to be blocked on YouTube, for the children listening to us, nobody will die in this battle. Nobody will. It's a sea battle with only happy seamen, and no one will die. They will all jump in a rubber boat and will land at some Italian city or so.
All of them are evacuated by friendly Allied forces.
And they will receive cake and apple juice right when they are in the rubber boat. Okay.
Yes.
So, D6.
D6, unfortunately hit.
Oh, I have your aircraft carrier. D7.
Yes, hit.
You know, that reminds me a little bit to Danzig in 1939, but I don't want to go deeper. I don't want to go deeper now.
Okay.
Oh. But for the children, there nothing happened. Everyone was happy. Okay, so
yes.
F5.
Water.
Okay.
Let's say B8.
Water. Yeah, B or D8? B or D8? B. Water, yes.
Your turn.
Why, Mateusz, may I ask you something? Why did you say no B8 after you had already a hit? Are you not concentrated on the game?
Yes, that's a strategy.
It is not Polish cavalry. We are playing battleship. Okay. Okay. G1.
G1. Yes. Water. Okay. I4.
Water. So let us check for E9.
9 water. So I6.
Hit.
Okay. I7.
And you sank it. You sank the ship. My destroyer.
Really glad to hear that. Okay, so anyway, it's again my turn. Yes.
Yes.
Oh, let's say F5.
F5 you had already on my plan. It was water.
Once more, sorry. So let's say
slowly I understand why it was possible in 2 weeks. Okay, but let's go on.
C4.
C4. Water. Let us check for F7.
F7, it's water.
Okay.
Okay, so J6.
G6 is water. H4.
H4, water. Okay. B10.
Water. B9.
Water as well. Okay, so then E8.
Oh, that's a hit.
Perfect. Then let's say E9.
Hit.
E10.
Hit.
E7.
You sank my battleship.
Perfect. That's traditional success of Polish maritime forces. You can congratulate me.
Yes.
That was the strategy I was talking about. See how effective is it?
We are still in the beginning. Be careful. Okay. So.
Okay, I'm continuing.
Yes.
J5.
Water.
Okay.
So let's come to the next topic, and you were already speaking about it. Was about Euroscepticism, the European Union. When you read, especially now in these days, and since we are sitting in our quarantine bunkers, we are both doing almost nothing else than reading news and reading different theories, and I think there are also a lot of conspiracy theories. And what one of the theories I'm reading almost every day from somewhere is that with this coronavirus measures, the EU is somehow trying to centralize power. But I don't know how you see this. I deeply disagree with these theories, since what we see right now is right the contrary. The EU turns out as a total defenseless entity when it comes to such a crisis. What we see in Europe is that every European nation state is trying to handle the crisis, to solve the crisis with their own measures. We see countries cooperating with each other on bilateral levels, like, for example, what you mentioned, Russia is helping Italy. So that is what we see now. In my opinion, this virus, and that has also to do with your question in the beginning, will be the world after Corona crisis. How will it change, or will it be the same like before? In my opinion, the EU central state will be deeply weakened down, and as a strong believing Eurosceptic, I would consider this as a positive effect, because we might experience now that only the nation states are really able and willing to handle and to solve such crises for their populations, and that what we have in Brussels, this whole apparatchik bureaucracy, is totally help and useless when it comes to these things. How do you see that?
You know, that's a topic for another lengthy discussion, but what I'm talking about is, from a purely geopolitical point of view, Europe had a chance before to create another geopolitical pole to become a more or less independent player. We have discussed it before in different debates, also for West, about the idea of, let's say, independent Europe, as a geopolitical pole in the world. Unfortunately, of course, talking about geopolitical pole, I'm not talking about the current Brussels bureaucracy, but about a kind of ideal, let's say, which could be implemented in the future if pro-European sovereignist independentist forces would come to power in different European countries.
Sorry to interrupt you at this point, but I think this is now very important for the listeners, and I think we both agree on that point, that the terms European Union and Europe are two totally different points for us. So the European Union doesn't equal the Europe we are talking about. The European Union is not Europe, as well the Europe is not represented by the European Union. I think that's very important, just to clarify that.
Definitely yes, but there was a purely theoretical possibility potential that if in different European countries, those forces I was talking about would, let's say, get their voice and their influence, the whole structure, the whole existing structure will be, let's say, remade and reworked, rethought even, and that it could look quite the other way. I mean that it could really become a quite of geopolitical pole. Unfortunately, I totally agree with you in this case that this structure seems to be useless for the future. And this is also the lesson we have when it comes to functioning of European Union, of course, because if they would have some, let's say, ambitions, if they would have some vision of a united continent, then they should create a special task force there on the level of European Union with sufficient funds and so on, and to coordinate the whole policy. And not to close the borders, because I mean closing the borders was not the solution if you are talking about one political, social and cultural territory as they were talking always about, yes? So, of course, they went bankrupt. I'm not talking about the bankruptcy of European integration, not European Union. I'm right now talking about the bankruptcy of the bureaucratic elites sitting in Brussels and in other capitals of the so-called European Union. This is a real fact, and we have to face it after the pandemic as well. On the other hand, I think we should also pay some attention at what is China doing now. What do you think?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that China will be a country which will for sure get out of this crisis strengthened and not weakened. I'm totally
That's
convinced.
True. Regardless the stupid, let's say, tactics chosen by the US administration, have you seen the amendments made at the paper with the speech of Donald Trump, which when he underlined and stressed in every of his speech that the virus is the Chinese virus.
Yeah, the Chinese virus.
So this is a classic. I mean, if some people are talking all this mumbo jumbo about the so-called information and hybrid war, which is supposedly waged by China and by Russia against the West, the so-called West, but this is a pure evidence that it is the US who is waging the information war, because this association of China and the virus, China and the threat, the danger for humanity. Of course, this is not the idea of Donald Trump, I'm sure, but his advisors, yes? Or
Yes.
Those people who are working on the whole information and political agenda of the President of the United States are telling him to imprint the notion of virus, so that virus in China, so that China would be always, associated with only the bad things, the terrible threats for all the world and so on. This is quite, I would even say, racist. Do you agree?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, it fits into the US-American policy of Donald Trump towards China of the last years, where I mean, he didn't say the yellow danger, but that term was somehow vivid, and it was always between the lines in any of his approaches. If it comes to the economic warfare, he raged against China. If it came to the criticism when it comes to the crisis in Hong Kong, and so on. So of course, yes, this is what we witnessed there. Yes, I agree.
Yeah. And China, on the other hand, as we clearly see, is doing everything now to show its, well, let's use the American term soft power, yes? But we might say that China is the most effective country when it comes to the terms of soft power during all this crisis, all this pandemic, I guess, because the number of the countries which got the assistance of the Chinese government, Chinese authority, fighting the pandemic, is growing every day. Those countries are, I believe, on every continent right now. Just look at European countries. I think almost all European countries have already got or are planning to get some assistance from China. Of course, some of the countries, due to political reasons, as they are under strong influence of the US, have rejected this assistance.
I think Germany has rejected. Germany rejects help from China and from Russia. That is my recent information. It can change already tomorrow, like anything changes right now.
Well, I think it will change, since if even the most let's say pro-US, neoconservative and so-called anti-communist government in Europe, the Polish government, has already agreed and already thanked the Chinese comrades for sending the assistance here to Poland. It clearly shows that probably everyone will, let's say, be very grateful for this assistance coming from Beijing. I know only one example of a country which for the moment being officially rejected the idea of Chinese help. It was Romania, which is quite, well, let's say, regardless the fact that its head of state, its president is a German, Klaus Iohannis. It's 100% controlled by the US at the moment. So the situation there, and I think that our Romanian friends, listeners and comrades will agree. The situation there is even worse than in Poland or in Baltic countries, which are more, let's say, rationalist here, fighting the pandemic. Anyway, the soft power created, inspired by the chairman Xi Jinping, is something which will affect the future world, I believe. And I believe that China will be something really different in the eyes of, let's say, global public opinion than it used to be before. And that it will effectively replace the so-called West. Yes.
And this metamorphosis is already taking place right now in these moments when we speak. I think that is something which is historically moment which is right now happening in front of our eyes. Also when it comes to Russia, but especially when it comes to China. But
yes, especially when it comes to China, sorry to interrupt you, because if you look at the history of Russia and of China and compare it, yes, at least during the Soviet times, but also in other centuries, Russia had some international ambitions, which means that it tried always to somehow influence, assist, or be present on the international arena. Yes. On the other hand, China was used to be very isolationist throughout its history. Yes,
that's true. Yes.
The moment has changed. I think, of course, the moment has changed in 2012, 2013, when Xi Jinping created this idea of One Belt, One Road initiative. Yeah. But on the other hand, now, before they have used just the economic means and financial means to show their attractiveness to the world, and for the moment being, they got the hearts of global community of different nations and people affected by the virus.
I totally agree. But before our listeners get now too much excited by our geopolitical analysis, it's now time to bore them again a little bit by sinking some ships off you, for example.
Okay, I'm ready.
Because we have two other very important topics to talk about, and I would like just to announce one important topic is what you were already mentioning. This is the propaganda war, what is very interesting when it comes to these topics, and I think we should speak some minutes about that. And we have a service part at the end where we will discuss the advices of world leaders when it comes to the corona crisis. But now let us calm down our listeners by listening to our sea battle which must sound very exciting to them.
Okay, your turn then.
It's my turn, yes. Here I didn't bomb anything. J5.
J5, well, nothing.
Okay, your turn.
Let's say B4.
Water.
Your turn.
B3.
Water.
It's your turn.
I'm thinking E5.
It's water. A5.
A5 hit.
B5.
Water.
Okay.
Okay, so now let's say I10.
A10, it's water. A6.
A6 hit, and it used to be a submarine.
Oh, I sank a Polish submarine.
Yes. So something which is purely theoretical because they don't exist since many years.
It is. Be careful, because don't now speak out military secrets of your country. You know
Okay.
how that can end. Okay, we should be now very.
Of course, yes.
So let us repeat: Poland doesn't have submarines. So.
We don't have official information about this. Well, excluding some info on the Polish media.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. E1.
E1, it's water.
Okay.
Okay, so D3.
D like Domingo, right? Not B.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Hit.
Perfect. I'm really glad. And then let's say D2.
D2. Water. Okay. G9.
G9. Let me see. Water. Okay, so we had here. No, let's say D4.
Water.
Okay, your turn.
Your gun aiming officer doesn't seem to be the best, but
Yes.
Okay. J10.
J10 hit.
J9.
Hit. Another submarine sank.
You had more than one submarines in the Polish naval forces.
Yes, now it's 0.
Okay. Okay, J1.
J1 is it's water.
Okay.
Okay, so now H6.
H6. Why? It's no, it's water. It's water, but I don't. It's water.
Your turn.
F1.
F1, it's water, of course, and now we have, let's say, E3.
Hit.
Okay. Then let's make it F3.
Hit.
Perfect. Well, J3.
Water.
G3.
Yeah, it's water. D9.
E9 you say. It's Vodka.
Okay.
So let's say it was here. So C3.
Hit.
Then B3.
You sank my aircraft carrier.
I'm so glad to hear that. Okay. Well, let's take a look. Then let's make it D8.
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 Water.
Okay.
So now I have to recover a little bit since you were sinking my aircraft carrier.
Okay.
What is gives also a little bit now a chance for Danzig to recover. You understand.
Yes.
But did you hear about the accusations coming? So because we were speaking about European Union, and the only real news in the last days regarding coronavirus, what I heard from EU was an accusation from Brussels that Russia is spreading fake news about the coronavirus. Were you reading about this news?
Of course, it was passed by leading news agencies, including Reuters. And unfortunately, several countries in Europe are now, let's say, trying to impose new regulations when it comes to censorship. Using or abusing the situation with coronavirus, they are implementing the extraordinary laws and regulations, of course, which is quite obvious. I mean, when it comes to quarantine and so on. But if you read carefully the regulations and laws which are now being implemented in several European countries, you might also notice that there's a huge stress, huge impact on the so-called information area, yes. And that more and more European countries are trying to reinstall the censorship which has functioned several years ago, and which is now, well, again brought back from the dead. And I have heard from several friends and comrades in different countries of Europe, particularly Central and Eastern Europe, that already several internet media have been closed by the governments due to the accusations that they are taking part in the so-called hybrid war or information war.
But Mateusz, I mean, now really also the very last European should now notice when we speak about fake news in connection with the coronavirus. I'm sure you also remember the times in January, February, when it started in China, when big European media were writing stuff like, oh, it's just like something like a flu, China is abusing now that for draconic measures against their own population, conspiracy theories such as coronavirus was invented to shut down the protests in Hong Kong. I think we had in Europe a festival of fake news covered by the biggest publishing houses, by the biggest state news agencies, paid by the European taxpayers, and it is so obviously stupid right now to accuse other countries to spread fake news about this. Do you think that now they overstretched it? Can it be that
we have a very absurd example of this campaign about the so-called information threat. Just a few days ago, some European media have published articles that the number of people who died in Italy because of coronavirus is a part of an information war waged by Russia and China against the West.
So
although this number was given by official authorities of Italy. Then you can you can imagine that some of the Western media are actually accusing the Italian authorities that they are participating in a hybrid war waged by Russia and China against the West.
And the people
this is the level of absurd.
And the dead people are all actors or zombies now. They don't exist.
So this is the level of absurd. You have talked about China. You have mentioned China, the manipulations about China by the Western media before. Well, actually, Chinese authorities seem to be really very patient and tolerant, because only a few days ago, I guess 1 week ago, they have made a final decision to expel some so-called correspondents of such newspapers as Washington Post and New York Times from China. But this was their first step. I mean, there was no other kind of censorship in the so-called communist China, but there was rather a mild and soft reaction on that. Yes. The threat now and the danger now we face is that using or abusing the real dangers coming from the pandemic, they will try to implement several laws and regulations which will stay in force even after the pandemic.
Yes.
The same thing, you remember the same thing was, for instance, in the United States, but in many other Western countries as well, after the September 11 attacks.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So the so-called Patriot Act is still in force.
Yes.
I mean, in the United States, and several other similar acts of law and regulations which have been implemented after 2001 in different Western countries. Yes. So now the situation, I mean, one of the results for the freedom of speech and for fundamental rights and liberties in Europe and in the United States as well, of course, might be different restrictions and, let's say, the real censorship and authoritarianism which will appear in Western countries after this pandemic. I mean, during this pandemic, but which will stay in force after the pandemic as well.
I totally agree, but at the same time, I mean, and that is maybe always, the wishful thinking of a non-mainstream journalist is always that the gap between the population, the corporate and the state media will become, especially now by the corona reporting, so big, so big that nobody will be able anymore to build over this gap any kind of bridge. I think the chance of the corona crisis to say it in a cynical way, is the loss of trust in corporate media and in state media to an extent that nothing will be believed anymore, and I think that is the big chance out of all that. But
well, it might be a big chance in the future, of course, I agree. But on the other hand, remember that people might be, according to the new laws and regulations, physically deprived of any access to any alternative sources of information.
That's true.
Because well, if they already in some European countries, if they are already closing the internet media, the access to some internet web portals and so on, if it happened actually even before, that, for instance, the Russian media in Baltic states, like the Sputnik in Estonia, was closed. The people working for them were blackmailed by the special police there in Estonia. So it was already happening since 2014 at least, yes?
Yes.
And I really fear that the whole tendency will be even stronger now, and that even the people, okay, I agree with you that people in Europe will not trust anymore the mainstream media. You are absolutely right. But the question is, will they have any alternative, or the systems will destroy any existing alternatives? Another thing just to consider here is the problem with the existing social media. Yeah. Which means that we have to also think about creating huge alternative structures of new social media, which could be more or less independent and accessible for the people, because of course the mainstream social media sooner or later will be also there. Well, actually they are now even, under some kind of censorship, but sooner or later the situation will get worse.
I totally agree. And this is, I mean, what we had until today was that the people using social media were very often always one step in advance of state regulations and of censorship measures. But one cannot rely on this. I totally agree that it's now the moment to create a reliable and also a stress test immune system of alternative media. But we should now again sink at least one ship, and then we should end our podcast with some pleasant topics with the advices of world-leading people. So I think it's my turn, or it's your turn. I forgot.
Of course, you are welcome. It's your turn.
I have to say that my battlefield looks already very chaotic, since I use two colors and I'm a little bit orientationless, but nevertheless, I will now try with C5.
C5, water.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me think. Let's say E7.
E7. Are you sure? This is a ship you sank already. You are now shooting at my.
Sorry. It's a chaos also. On my paper, there's a chaos.
You are shooting at an old German flag.
Yes. I'm trying to torture the people who are trying to evacuate. Okay. So let's say A3.
Water.
Your turn.
H6.
H6. Well, it's water, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's make it F9.
Water.
Your turn.
H2.
H2, say it's water. Then we have, let's say, C9.
That's water.
Mm-hmm.
B7.
B7. Let me see, it's water as well. Okay. So J2.
Water.
Your turn.
Now I take the most stupid field ever. A1.
Water.
It's lucky you.
Yeah. Okay, so let's say F9.
F9 is water. Mateusz, as far as I can see, you sank from me 3 ships.
That's true.
And I have still my both submarines, and I sank from you 1, the 2 submarines, and your aircraft carrier. That means you have still. What do you still have? How many ships? Oh God!
I have still 2 ships. Okay, let's come to our next topic.
Yes.
At the moment being, let's sum up our battle.
Yes.
And so you have lost 1 aircraft carrier.
That's right.
What else you have lost?
I lost the aircraft carrier. I lost my battleship.
That's true. So you have lost it, okay? And
my destroyer.
And your destroyer. So you are there with 2 submarines.
That's true.
I don't know who won. Let's say that we are in equal situation because I still have battleship and destroyer.
Let us.
And I have lost 2 submarines and aircraft carrier.
And let us say this on behalf of our both proud nations, that they are both so lucky that we both didn't become admirals of our naval forces.
Yes, that's true.
I think it's a big luck. So let us say for now, I bring my submarines to La Rochelle in our harbor and re-equip them. And then we will see maybe at the next podcast if I will find them.
Okay.
I will send you, of course, a photo of the battle plan. It looks a little bit like, I don't know, if a monkey with a green and blue ball pen was trying to draw some postmodernist stuff. But it's not so bad. So let's come to the last topic. Within all the corona crisis and with all the serious topics, and the Pope was saying that God shall protect us, and I think the Patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church also. So we had very, very much and very often very serious comments. But between all of this, the president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, came with a very good and serious medication against the coronavirus. Maybe you can say more about that, because I'm very interested in that kind of topic.
Well, we have a president who is since 1994, because in Belarus we have President Lukashenko elected and re-elected since 1994, which is, as you probably know, completely against and at odds with any kinds of political correctness. And also this time during the pandemic, President Lukashenko gives his own personal advices how to guarantee your safety in times of coronavirus. There are basically 2 advices, or let's say 3. Vodka, garlic, and sauna, the traditional Russian banya, which means that according to President Lukashenko, you have to drink at least 50 gram or 100 gram of vodka, then enter a banya, and then after the banya to continue drinking with another 50 or 100 gram at least. And then, of course, eat as much garlic as it's possible for you. So, the let's say kind of popular advice and traditional medical treatment might be, regardless the coronavirus, quite useful for those people who like to take care of their health. What do you think?
Especially the garlic part seems to me like a secret recipe for social distancing.
Yes, and hopeful. This is a really smart plan. Of course, you are right, because President Lukashenko himself stressed that this would be one of the results of eating more and more garlic. So this is quite natural. The natural medicine proposed by, and means of natural medicine suggested by President Lukashenko are really worthy to listen to, regardless let's say the serious all the serious kind of the pandemic and of this situation. Let's say those advice made by the president himself of one of the European countries is quite interesting for everyone, and I guess we should listen to him. When it comes to Belarus, by the way, it's a phenomenon. Today I have learned that in Belarus there will be still their local national football championship. So they are the only country in Europe, I think, which has not cancelled the local national football championship, by the way. Maybe it's because they eat garlic and drink vodka.
So if you go in a Belarusian supermarket, you will see that there is no garlic anymore because the people are all buying this. Like in Germany, when you go there, you don't find toilet paper and rice and pasta. Maybe.
Yes, but the vodka will be always there. Maybe not in the official magazines, but there are also several ways in Belarus to produce your own vodka. They have quite really. I have tried several times traveling there. That they have probably, well, let's say the best vodka in Eastern and Central Europe at least. Which means that they are really professionals and they are ready to produce it even as homemade drink.
Maybe they can export it in future also for disinfection to Europe.
Yes, hopefully yes, because thanks to being a little bit isolated, I mean, it's a general but serious remark now that, countries which are according to, let's say, the theory of Immanuel Wallerstein,
yes,
which are on the peripheries are more safe now, yes?
Yes.
Do you agree? When it comes to times of pandemic. That's why Belarus, and also because of some wise advice given by its president, Belarus might be more safe nowadays than many other, particularly Western countries of this world.
Or in other words, they did lockdown before it was cool.
Yes, that's true.
And just one last word about Lukashenko. I really hope that one day there will be a book with his most valuable and most famous quotes and advices. Maybe you remember some years ago, and that was really funny, Lukashenko was harshly criticized by German Foreign Minister Westerwelle.
Yes.
Yes. So Westerwelle called Lukashenko a dictator, Europe's last dictator, or something like that. And as everyone knew, was that Westerwelle, who was from the Liberal Party, was living in a homosexual relationship. And Lukashenko answered, I think it was on Twitter or in some social media, that Lukashenko answered, better dictator than gay.
Yes, exactly. And it was repeated during an official press conference, as far as I remember. So he had really brilliant answers, and you would collect a lot of quotations like that, which really I agree with you totally that it should be published, translated to different European languages, because it seems that he is starting to become a classic.
Absolutely. We are coming to the end of our, this time, very long podcast, but with a very, very, very exciting sea battle. I am totally sure that the audience appreciates how we were telling each other G7 and A9 and so on. But that is the good thing in times of Corona, when people are sitting at home and they cannot leave. You can torture people with such stuff, and I think we should go on doing this.
In normal times, people would not have time to listen to our battleships and so on. In those times, I guess that even this is worthy to be listened to.
They would be upset in normal times. They would send us invoices for wasting their time.
Anyway, we really do promise even more sensational materials and topics for our for our next podcast. I'm sure that people will get even more excited as they did get.
Yes, we make a podcast and call it 15 minutes of silence or something like that. Would be also exciting.
That would be a kind of avant-garde postmodernist art of post-apocalyptic or apocalyptic journalism.
The sounds of whales.
Yes, that's true.
Mateusz, it was a pleasure to play against you, Battleship. I deeply regret that I didn't win. I have to admit.
Well, try it next time, Manuel. It was a pleasure for me as well.
Okay, we will talk soon again, and we wish our audience good times. Stay safe, stay healthy. listen to podcasts, read stuff.
Yes, stay home and listen to our podcasts, read our stuff we publish, and who wants to get in touch, let's make it via the social media, and you can also suggest different topics you would like us to discuss here.
Absolutely.
In our podcast.
Our email address is DieGutenMenschen@protonmail.com, but it will be always be written also under the podcast. Mateusz, I wish you a nice evening, and we will talk very soon, and we will announce it on our Facebook page.
Hear you soon, and thanks to all the listeners who have listened to our podcast.
To all the listeners who listened to the end.
That's true. Particularly to those who have listened to the end.
To the bloody end. Okay.
Yeah,
thank you. See you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
This program was presented to you by Manuel Ochsenreiter and Mateusz Piskorski, the hottest dissident who won't violate any time the global rules against racism, extremism, or any other bad isms.